Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by gifts from Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, Hush Blackwell, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics this week: the health care bill makes some people ill, the Kansas wrap-up session far from wrapping up, and shedding some light on dark money, plus roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and check in with a Kansas City, Missouri council member about some of the many issues facing those 13 elected officials. Joining me for that discussion is Councilwoman Alicia Kennedy, who represents the 5th District. Among her council assignments, she serves as chair of the Public Safety Committee. Councilwoman Kennedy, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
How would you describe the role of the Public Safety Committee? Is it an oversight role, and if so, what are you overseeing?
Well, this council term, we've combined neighborhoods and public safety, which previously was neighborhoods and healthy communities and public safety separately. So the overall well-being and safety of the residents of Kansas City. We deal with issues ranging from the violence prevention coalitions to updates from Kansas City Police Department, as well as dealing with public health issues and proactive measures.
Is the fire department part of your jurisdiction?
Absolutely.
So your committee oversees those areas that spend the largest part of the city's budget.
That would be true.
Will you and your committee be involved in selecting a new Kansas City, Missouri police chief?
Well, as you know, the city of Kansas City does not have local control.
Right. Do you think it should?
Well, I think at some point we need to figure out how we get there, being the only
trying to figure that out for 50 years, haven't we?
Well, I think we're at a good place because with the selection of a new chief, more than likely he's probably going to come from somewhere where they did have local control. And I think they'll be able to bring some best practices to our city on how we begin to incorporate that.
So you think the new chief will be selected from outside the ranks of the current police department?
That is a significant possibility.
Do you want that to be the case? Would that be your preference?
I think we need to have the best qualified person to be able to lead our city.
Is race or ethnicity a factor in selecting the new chief?
I do believe cultural competence is a factor.
Now, what does that mean?
That means someone who is aware of the differences in the different cultural aspects and the racial challenges that a municipality of this size deals with, and being willing to be open to addressing those issues in a forward-thinking manner.
Was the NOVA program, you were part of that, I guess, the No Violence?
I was in the prosecutor's office at its infancy, yes, that's correct.
You were the assistant prosecutor and assistant prosecutor.
Yes, and
I
had the privilege of working on special projects in the prosecutor's office with Gene Peters Baker, mostly community-based, proactive law enforcement measures.
After the lengthy discussions about violence in Kansas City, were there any conclusions reached by the people investigating it?
Well, I think that the conclusion is there's more work to be done, and it's going to require some more purposeful collaboration between all the partners that are addressing this issue. The number we got from the task force was there's over $30 million a year in public dollars invested in violence prevention in Kansas City. And how are we going to leverage those resources to work together to improve our outcomes?
Any explanation for why we have the frequent homicides that we have in Kansas City?
There's no one answer, but I do believe there are layers of it.
Is there any way to prevent them? Any activity police can engage in to prevent homicides? They're usually acts of passion, aren't they?
You know, we've had homicides since the beginning of time in biblical days, and so I don't think you prevent them altogether, but we can reduce the occurrence of it, and the CDC has taken some very thoughtful, methodical approaches of dealing with curing the violence spread epidemic of the thought process and cultural norms of violence in communities. And I think as we begin to incorporate some of those strategies, we'll begin to see reductions in violence in these in targeted populations.
Let's touch on some other topics. The streetcars just had their first anniversary, big celebration, a lot of good public relations. Do you want to see the streetcar line continued out to the plaza and beyond?
It's got to go somewhere.
Well, is that where it should go? Is that what money should be spent on?
Well, I think we have a broad range of needs, but when you talk about the cost and the return on investment, it needs to go along area where you're going to have immediate impact of economic return. Crown Center is excited about the opportunity to go further. The plaza, obviously. I would like to see it go as far as to the Bannister Complex, down the trolley track corridor, up 85th Street and end it along 87th Street and 435.
Down to 30 seconds, so 2 quick questions and 2 really quick yes or no kinds of answers. Are you convinced there will be an 800-room downtown convention hotel?
I think we've got a lot of work to do. The initiative petitioners have begun their process, and we just have to make sure we convince the voters that this is ideal for Kansas City, and we're going to handle the finances responsibly. Are
we going to see a one-terminal new Kansas City International in the next several years?
I believe so.
Vote in November?
I believe so.
All right. Thank you very much. Good to meet you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
That is Kansas City, Missouri Councilmember Alicia Kennedy. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Jason Grill is a senior advisor at Paris Communications. Steve Rose is a Johnson County civic leader and a Kansas City Star columnist. Teresa Garza is a former Jackson County legislator. And attorney Steve Marakian is with the law firm of Wersch, Hobbs, and Marakian. Special thanks to Steve for filling in at the last moment when one of our scheduled panelists had to cancel due to a family emergency. Well, there was a lot of reaction and probably more overreaction to the passage in the U.S. House of a bill repealing and replacing Obamacare. Protesters gathered at the office of Kansas 3rd District Congressman Republican Kevin Yoder, who voted for the GOP-backed bill. While some are in panic mode over the bill's passage, it might be calming to realize it will be months before there's any final action by the Senate and the House on a replacement measure. We don't know what it will contain, but we do know there has been much unhappiness with Obamacare, its availability, its premiums, and its deductibles. And Republicans, including Kevin Yoder, ran for election pledging to repeal and replace Obamacare. So did Yoder have any realistic choice when the bill came to a vote? We start with Jason.
He always has a choice, but I think you nailed it on the head there. Repeal and replace. He campaigned on that. He was reelected fairly handily, I think. His district seems to be leaning Republican 50-50, but he hasn't really had a tough challenger, in my opinion. So I think he probably made the right decision. He campaigned on this, and going forward, you know, the bill's going to change. So he wanted to start the process of let's repeal and replace Obamacare and then see what the Senate throws back. That's what people don't realize. This is going to change, you know, 50, 60 more times within different dealings that happen. So he wanted to get the process started. So I think he made the right decision.
Same question to Teresa.
Yeah,
Did he have any choice?
I agree with Jason. I mean, you always have a choice when you're elected, but again, based on his district and the dynamics of it and the demographics of it, he did what he thought was best for that particular, you know, at that particular time for that particular bill.
Do you think he'll pay a price for it?
It's hard to say because his district is very, like you said, 50-50 Republican-Democrat. So he's been elected. He hasn't had a tough challenger. It's hard to say if he's going to have a tough challenger in the future. So for him to look at down the road at where he's at right now with this particular bill, he did what he thought was best.
Steve, would you agree that people ought to calm down until there's more known about what will be in a final measure by the House and the Senate, the bill that is finally presented to the president for signature?
Well, I think what the public is doing is trying to send a message. Not, you know, Kevin Yoder's already voted, but I think by their protests now, I think they're hoping to influence the Senate to kind of undo some of the stuff that was done. Now, Congressman Yoder and I talked yesterday for a solid hour about pre-existing conditions, and he said this is a major distortion. And he went on, he made a very strong case about the fact that pre-existing conditions are a major part of the bill. There are some exceptions to it, which he'll admit to, but that's the fact. Now, I told him, and I will tell you, that when Obamacare was going out there, they said there would be death panels, and it stuck. And it's very hard once you repeat something over and over and over again to get it unstuck. Pre-existing conditions is stuck in the public's eye.
But it's generally untrue that Republicans are going to say people with pre-existing conditions aren't guaranteed coverage. They're not saying that at all.
No, they're not. But Steve is absolutely correct. It's not about what's in the bill. It's about the nature of the debate. The nature of the debate has now changed. And this happened the day Justice Roberts changed his vote and said Obamacare was not unconstitutional. From that point on, we were on a path, essentially an irreversible path, to a single-payer plan. The American public has now come to believe that health care is a human right. And included in that, and at the very core of that, is coverage of pre-existing conditions in the way that the Democrats want them covered. So when Yoder says this bill does not take out pre-existing conditions, he's absolutely right. But as far as the public is concerned, if any insurance company, and we're talking about freaking insurance, which is a risk pool, but not anymore. If any insurance company has the audacity in the marketplace to say, well, you've got cancer, why should you pay the same rate as the guy who has no illnesses? There is a massive outcry that we now have taken away a human right. And so, because of that, this bill is going to be modified greatly in the Senate, and what's going to come out of the Senate and ultimately out of the House, and Republicans will do this so they can get reelected in 2018, okay? It's going to be essentially the Obamacare bill passed again.
That's what I was going to say. It's Obamacare light.
Let me follow up on what Steve said, and Charles Krauthammer, the noted conservative columnist, said the same thing. He says Americans now consider health care a government issue, a government responsibility, and in 10 years, we'll have something like Medicare for all, that there'll be a one-payer system, and the one payer will be the federal government.
He stole that from me.
So I think
he often steals
Did he now?
material.
So, and he touched on it, human right. Like, people believe it's a human right. I think that comes from the concept or the democratic values of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So they tie that health care into that life component. I think that's where that kind of stems from.
Yeah, and I think we should quickly add that the one thing the bill did do is fairly decimate Medicaid. And there's no doubt about it.
Oh, the expansion of Medicaid.
Well, not only the expansion, but the funding of it. When it goes to block grants to states, and they have the ability to do this and do that. And I said to the congressman, I said, I think that Medicaid has been, really hit hard. And he said, we have a philosophical difference. Yeah. He didn't say it wasn't true. Yeah. He said, we have a philosophical difference.
Well, it's too bad the founding fathers didn't realize they should have said life, liberty, health care, and the pursuit of happiness.
All right.
Kansas legislature is back in Topeka for what is called a wrap-up session, but it does not appear that much has yet been wrapped up. Among the issues, finding a way to obliterate a $900 million budget deficit and figuring out how much more the state Supreme Court wants spent on public education. Nobody seems to know, and the court won't say. And even if the legislature comes up with answers to those thorny questions, there is always the possibility of a Governor Brownback veto. No one watches Kansas news more closely than Steve Rose. So, Steve, do you think this wrap-up session is going to be unwrapped for quite a while?
It's going to be a while. I mean, they're not.
There's no limit.
Well, theoretically, they can keep going, I guess. Well, yes, but on the court issue of equal pay, equal.
I mean, there's no limit to how long the legislature can stay in session.
That is correct.
A lot of money.
They must resolve school funding at deadline time, or they will close the schools. So they don't have all the time in the world.
When most students aren't going to school in June,
but for the fall,
it would be closer in the fall. I mean, that's really hanging over their heads. There has to be ultimately some sort of a tax increase, and I think everybody knows it. But and the elimination of the exemptions for businesses who are LLCs. I think there's a popular uprising even in the legislature to get rid of that. But of course, the veto is there, hanging over their heads, and whether they can get 2/3 is they have to. I mean, they have to. There isn't any question they're going to have to.
What are they going to do about school finance, since nobody, and I mean nobody, knows how much money needs to be allocated for schools that will satisfy the court?
No question about it. And what is being kind of rumored now is that and this guy gets in the weeds. I'll try not to get too far into them. But the local option budgets, that people pass within their local school districts to augment the state are going to be used for things like at-risk students, which are already being funded by the general fund budget, releasing more money to be spent on schools. In other words, short version, the local control that people have at their schools will be diluted and spent in a different
Oh,
way.
Johnson Countyans will love that.
Oh,
won't
they're
they?
going to they'll go crazy for that.
Jason,
Missouri looks good right now with our state funding formula being fully funded.
will Brownback be able to maintain his tax policy, his tax philosophy?
Every year I've sat here and said,
no.
that LLC exemption's going to go away. And,
Yeah.
You know, and then every year it stays there, and now it's, what, 4 or 5 years? And everyone
Right.
says it's going to go away this year. I will believe it when I see it, Steve, because I don't know what to believe with the tax policy. But I think he's going to fight and try his best, you know.
Teresa,
maintain that.
you think the Kansas legislature would have an easier time if Sam Brownback resigned and went to work elsewhere and the lieutenant governor took over?
I think that there would still be issues. I mean, in any governing body, you're still going to have, you know, different ideologies, different philosophies, different ways to reach the final end result. So I think that it's always going to exist. Would it be less? That's a possibility. I try to avoid Kansas politics lately because there's so much going on and they have so many things that they are really dealing with that are unfortunately impacting the entire state and the residents there.
Quick question, Steve. I asked Senator Boyer when she was a guest on Ruckus if it would make any difference if Brownback resigned and Jeff Collier became governor, and I think she said essentially no, because they have the same policies and the same approaches.
Well, I think that although, you know, Jeff Collier really hasn't been out front on what he thinks about policies and has stayed fairly detached, but from people who know him fairly well, believe that he is very much in the Brownback mold, and you would not expect to see a great difference in the way the state is being
And they
governed.
did run as a team, as governor, lieutenant governor. You have to do that in Kansas,
That's
unlike
true.
Missouri, where lieutenant governor and governor run separately and may be of different parties. So Brownback, Steve, will leave office in January 2019 or before if he decides to resign. But regardless of what happens in this session or the remaining sessions before he's out of office, has his legacy been decimated to a point where it can't be restored or improved?
You know, I never say never in politics. He has really not done himself well, and there's not a lot of time left in terms of political time with him leaving office when he does, and I don't think he's leaving early. He's done himself a great disservice, and I think he's done Kansas a great disservice by sort of a stubborn refusal to be flexible enough, as Steve and Jason pointed out. This attachment to this tax break for the LLCs, it makes no sense to me. He tried it. It didn't work. Okay, it's a pool of money that could be coming in. He's stuck with that. But the big issue that he's never going to be able to overcome, I don't think, is this school finance issue. And again, Steve raises the issue of the local option budgets and so forth, and all of that is fine. And Steve has actually written about this many times in a very knowledgeable way. And the problem is, in my view, and I've said this before, and I have to be careful what I say because I'm a lawyer. The Supreme Court has,
well, you never are you?
The Supreme Court, in my view, has caused enormous problems for the state of Kansas by being, in my view, intractable. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to let you legislate and do your job and see how it works, they've made a determination, apparently, that unless it's done in the way they think is appropriate, and I mean in terms of the financing, not just the legal aspects of it, the micromanagement, they're not going to accept it. So Steve mentioned local option budgets. I will tell you, I don't think the Supreme Court will ever agree to that. They're fixed on this idea that if Johnson Countyans want to tax themselves more to pay for Johnson County schools, it's unconstitutional. And in my view, that is simply a gross distortion of the Kansas Constitution.
But Steve, they have, in all the decisions they've made,
too.
they have never said what you just said. And they've had the opportunity to say it.
And Steve, that's your next column because
All right.
we have to move on.
All right.
There is controversy in Missouri and elsewhere over something called dark money. Essentially, it means contributions to nonprofits and some other organizations that don't have to disclose publicly who gave the money. This troubles many people when those organizations engage in political activity. Missouri Governor Eric Greitens is criticized by some fellow Republicans and others for his nonprofit called A New Missouri Incorporated. It is alleged Greitens has used and will use the funds to attack political opponents. While there is much criticism of dark money, there must be something positive about it. So, Steve, is there a bright side to dark money?
Well, you know, if there is one, it's pretty hard to find. I've said repeatedly on this program and elsewhere, I have no problem. I support the Supreme Court's decision with regard to campaign financing and funding and so forth. I think people should be able to give their money and speak through their money. But this dark money thing bothers me. I think the flip side of the ability to give as much money as you want to a candidate through PACs and other organizations and so forth is that you ought to have to, the campaigns ought to have to disclose where they're getting it. If Donald Trump is getting money from, extreme right-wing groups, I want to know it. If Hillary Clinton is getting money from the Clinton Foundation or from George Soros, I want to know it. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to give it, but when I vote, I want to know who is funding this candidate, because it tells me a lot about basically what kinds of strings might be attached. I don't like dark money. I think there ought to be things to change it without restricting the ability to contribute. I think you should have to disclose who's giving you the money.
You haven't heard Trump gets the money from Putin.
Oh, well, we know that. That's been proven by 17 agencies.
Teresa, does Eric Greitens have justification for not publicly naming the contributors to his nonprofit organization, not naming how much and who gave money for his inauguration or who pays for his air travel?
So I think when it comes to dark money, that transparency, I think, when it comes to any campaign contributions is extremely important for a functioning democracy. And I think everybody can agree on that. But what I do think is that there is this ongoing balance to achieve between individuals' rights of privacy and as a democratic principle, and then also how elections and campaigns are actually done in practice. And so if you've ever ran for office, if you've ever held office, if you've ever worked on a campaign, you understand what those dynamics look like, and sometimes it's outside of your control. Also, putting on my former hat as the field director for the American Cancer Society, as a nonprofit, that was one of the things that fell under my purview was the 501c4 and raising money for it. Not that they took stances on candidates, but they did take stands on issues that impacted cancer patients and their families. And so what does that look like from an advocacy standpoint when you're attempting to educate the public, educate elected officials, and make them aware of how stuff impacts people?
Quick answer from one or both of you. Is there ever a circumstance where someone legitimately doesn't want his or her name disclosed and has noble reasons for giving the money?
You're a CEO of a company, a business owner, and you want to support a friend, but you don't you're a Democrat and you want to support a Republican, or you want to do those types of things, and you don't want to have anyone know.
Dark money can be justified.
There's certain exceptions, but I agree with everyone at this table.
Do you agree with that, Steve?
I think there has to be. I guess there has to be some exception, but I want to say I stand by Steve in what he said. I thought he said it eloquently, and I agree with that.
First time.
First time.
For the eloquence, not the agreement.
That's why we have him here. The Kansas City Star unleashed a tough editorial attack on Greitens last Sunday, complaining about his secrecy, ethics, travel, lack of attention to policy, and much more. Generally speaking, Steve, was that criticism justified? And we're running short on time.
Well, generally it was. My problem with Greitens is that he is like a lot of what I consider to be sort of the new Trump-style guys. They seem to think that by changing everything up and so forth, they have a right to engage in things that I believe are contrary to good public policy. Now, look, you're the governor, okay? Some of these things should not be kept secret. You need to focus on policy and get away from all these distractions, and you don't govern well or help yourself in governing the state of Missouri when all the time you're being attacked by people saying, well, you're not telling us where you got this money, and all these little issues. This is what Trump is doing to himself. Keeps shooting himself in the foot on ridiculous issues instead of governing the country. So Greitens deserves criticism for being too secretive. Many think Greitens has done a good job,
right? I mean, if a lot of people have thought he's moved things and he's been positive, but these ethics violations, the dark money, it's just clouding the session.
I agree.
All right. Let's head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckheads have 30 seconds or so each to defend or upend people and events in the news. And we start this time with Teresa.
Okay, so I'm going to put my hat back on as the previous field director.
By the way, I like it.
for the American Cancer Society, and just roast the 217 representatives that are attempting to gut the ACA, especially when it comes to lifetime limits and out-of-pocket expenses, and the way that impacts cancer patients and their families, which are two of the items that the American Cancer Society pushed to be part of the Affordable Care Act.
Jason.
I'd like to toast the FBI division in Kansas City. Luckily, I had the opportunity to go through the Citizens Academy, which is a great program here over the last 9 weeks, talking about all the FBI issues over there every week. And with all the things going on right now in the national news, I think that we need to realize that the FBI does a great deal of work here in our region, and in Missouri and Kansas City, to stop crimes and to help those in our neighborhoods and our community, and they should be committed on that. And the Citizens Academy is a great program if you ever have a chance to take care of it.
I've not done it, but I know people who have, and they all swear by it and say it's great.
Cool.
Steve Marakian.
I'm roasting Chris Matthews and other MSNBC morons who spasmodically label everything with which they disagree as a constitutional crisis or fascism. Most recently, the firing of James Comey. You can disagree with the president's firing of Comey if you want to, but it's not unconstitutional and it's not fascism. Hypocrisy, the hypocrisy of the left, who howled for Comey's firing not more than 4 months ago, is simply appalling. There's nothing worse. The only thing that's worse, I should say, than a hypocrite is a lying hypocrite.
And Steve Rose.
Well, I haven't roasted.
Not confused with a lying hypocrite.
No.
Just now, Steve
No,
Rose.
so a quick roast. I haven't given one for a long time to Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State of Kansas. The judges have said he should turn over, 2 judges have said he should turn over documents that will be used in a lawsuit. And the premise is that it will prove that Chris Kobach is virtually fantasizing about illegal immigrants voting and in any kind of numbers other than about 9, which is what he's found so far.
And finally, here is a toast to U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who has proposed a bill that would take the $14 billion seized from a well-known drug lord to help build a border wall. The bill will never pass, but the toast is to its name and acronym. It is titled Ensuring Lawful Collection of Hidden Assets to Provide Order. Acronym, El Chapo. And that's Ruckus for this week. Back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.